and thank you everyone for being here so late this afternoon. It's been a very special day, and it's been also quite a challenge to reorganize everything, so I'm particularly thankful to the AAN and to the history department and to Roberta Bonetti, dear colleague and friend, which makes everything possible all the time. I was wondering how could I possibly connect today's engagement of all of us with the faraway topics I'm going to talk about. And as I was trying to connect the non-connectable, I thought the mediation is the body, is where you are. We anthropologists are users of words. We write, we speak a lot, but then reality goes outside there in quite a different direction sometimes. And the most powerful link we have between what we write and say and what we, in the real world outside there, is the body, right? So being there, being in the things, materially translating your physicality somewhere else in order to let things happen. It isn't necessary, it isn't sufficient, but it is necessary. It's what we did this morning by being somewhere else than here. And I think this is quite a great thing that we achieved, bringing our body somewhere else than here. And this is also the starting point of what I'm going to say about this experience of research that I had recently. So after a number of rather difficult architectural organization among institutions, the first expedition for an anthropologist in the Antarctica region was planned a couple of years ago towards an Antarctic research station. I have to say, I don't like to kind of put myself in the front line normally, but that was actually the first time that an anthropologist was in that research station. It's actually that anthropologists never go to Antarctica anyway. Social sciences are not in the Antarctic regions anyway, and not anyway for this long time. So I am a bit biographical now for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to go to the topics, but the issue is that I had to physically move, and that made the difference between studying and being. So I reached this station, which is called the Mario Zucchelli Station, MZS, which is overfacing the sea, the Ross Sea, in Antarctica in October 2024. And there I stayed for 3 months, basically never leaving the stations, if not occasionally. And everything I did in these 3 months happened inside the station and happened in relation with the people which were in the station. My colleagues there were also working outside, so I was in a sort of particular conditions, being more confined than others for a number of reasons. And after 3 months of this, let me just add that we could not leave, okay? The specific situation that anthropologists know so well about this context is that you cannot leave. Of course, you are entitled to go somewhere, but then you have to wait for the end to come, right? So again, this is a situation where your body is put at a challenge in terms of resistance, in a way. And eventually I left, okay? Of course, eventually everything finishes, including the 3 months of being cut out of the world, and I was sailed back by the icebreaker Laura Bassi, which most of you might know if you happen to follow Antarctic expeditions, because this is the only icebreaker that our country has, and so it's the only one that can ship on people to bring them back from the Antarctica to, in that case, was New zealand, because that was the closest place. After 12 days of navigation among the ice, it was really stunning. So, okay, why this far? So why did I go this far? What sense does it make to go that far to do some ethnography that you can do in so many other places close to here? And I tell you this, which I also didn't know quite a few years ago. South of the 66 parallel in our planet, we enter into a different jurisdiction of case. So south of this parallel, which is not a convention because it is a geographical landmark, south of such parallel, you have, for the first time, you encounter the no night, day, or no daylight night. So you have the 24 hours day and 24 hours night. It's a situation, it's geographical conditions that you keep finding as further south you go. Of course, you can find it as well in the northern hemisphere, north of the 6 axis parallel north. So south of the Antarctic Circle, unlike what happens in the north, we have a suspension of the nation-based organizational relation among places. So there are no countries, no permanent residential people, no nations. It's a strange nowhere, which is actually regulated by a so-called Antarctic Treaty. It's a piece of document which is kind of getting really old now. It's been signed in 1961. For those of you familiar with European history, that's the year when the Berlin Wall was built. So it's a particular year when the winners of the World War II decided to agree on a shared management of this unexplored or unconquered land. 12 were the initial states which organized the Antarctic Treaty. Of course, not only the winners of the World War II, but also countries like Japan, Belgium, Australia, New Zealand, and stuff. Today, there are 59 members under signing such treaty. Only 19 of them vote, so are effective members, voting members. In order to be a voting member, so having your say in what should happen to Antarctica, which is a no-nation place, in order to have your say, you need to have a strong interest in research. So, meaning you need to have a research station in Antarctica. What does this mean? You need to have money. You need that your government has decided at some stage that puts enough money to build a station in Antarctica. And to whom you ask, I have the money, I want to build my station in Antarctica. You go to the Antarctic Treaty people and say, I would like to have a station. Do you have the money? Yes. I'll give you this land. The Antarctic Treaty Committee assign you a piece of land as if it was nobody's. Is it nobody's? Does it belong to the Antarctic Treaty? Well, if this negotiation goes well, the country is assigned a piece of land in Antarctica and can develop its own research station. From that moment on, what happens is that that very station becomes a place of the country. It's a sort of long arm of the country, of the nation, which has built it. So the laws which apply in the station are those of the nation which the station belongs to. Okay? So you have a sort of pattern, puzzle picture, like the one which is depicted here in this image, whereby by moving from one station to another, I mean, stations are actually pretty far away from each other, but if you move from one to the other, you change the legal setting because you are actually as if you were crossing borders continuously. But the border is as large as a village, as large as a station. Okay? So I thought it was quite a thrilling environment to start an anthropological research. So what does this treaty say? What does it talk about? Okay, let me summarize it in 4 very simple terms and then see if what actually do they mean in practice, in applied sense. Peaceful cooperation, shivering, talk about peace. Scientific research, environmental protection, and freeze territorial claims. Okay, so let's start from the bottom one, freeze territorial claims. This is a nice image from Google Earth of Antarctica. And the name of the nations which I listed here are those that do have territorial claims on Antarctica. So we have Argentina and Chile on top left because of territorial proximity, okay? The Antarctic Peninsula is actually almost touching South America, as you know, therefore they claim it is a bordering proximity which justifies claiming the ownership of some land in Antarctica. On the other side here, bottom right, we have Australia and New Zealand, which cannot claim proximity, despite they are the most proximate country, but actually they claim the right of having first sent expeditions. So first expeditions were starting from Australia and New Zealand. And then, of course, we have France, UK, and Norway, which have got nothing to do with the southern hemisphere of the planet, but they sent explorers in a relevant expedition in the past. I'm not stopping on this. So these territorial claims are not cancelled, are not eliminated by the Antarctic Treaty. They are just put on hold, okay? So the situation is pretty much unstable, as you can imagine, in the world as it is today. What about environmental protection? Another issue, another big chapter of the Antarctic Treaty. Okay, so let me just have a very quick, and again, this is not a topic now, but a quick summary of what's happening. The world is warming up, and the warming up is mostly visible in the southern hemisphere, and it's mostly visible in Antarctica because the ice melts, as simple as that. And where do the ice melt? In the areas which are more internal with respect to the mainland continent, which are those called the Weddell Sea and the Ross Sea, so those two large, very big internal seas, let's say. Why there? Because on those two areas of the Antarctic region, there are massive coverage of ice shelves, the so-called sea ice, which is eroded from underneath by the warming oceans. So the warming oceans up north in the northern hemisphere circulates around the globe until they kind of excavate underneath the glaciers. When they bump into the rock, they can't do very much damage, but when they can enter the warm currents underneath the ice shelves, there you have this phenomenon that everybody knows, which is the glacier detachment. Okay? So, environmental protection. Let's have a look at the scale. How can we possibly protect the glacier in Antarctica when they are eroded by global warming of the sea and of the oceans, which is produced in the north? I'm not going to go now into the circulation of warm currents, but actually the Antarctic Treaty has got a chapter which is dedicated on environmental protection, which cannot be applied directly there because the causes for such lacking of protection is somewhere else, and it resides in the countries which signed the Antarctic Treaty. You see the loop, the logical loop. So another problem. Okay, so another chapter of the treaty is about scientific research. Here we go. Scientists we start. So, from the large scale of the treaty to the small scale of the station, this is an aerial view of the station where just before I landed. And here I bring myself as an anthropology into a village. This is it, okay? So, exactly the area which is surrounded by this circle in this image is the place where I lived for 3 months. It is not even a village, it's a very, very small place, inhabited by 70 to 8 people, most of which are not scientists. Scientists count up to the less than 20% of the 70 people resident there, 80% of which are men. There were 8 women and 70 men, kind of, while we were there. And the space is extremely confined. Actually, the inhabited place is the main central blue building that you see there, because all the others all around are technical infrastructures which are used daily for functioning and for mechanical needs of the station, but nobody lives there. They're sort of working places and back. So the context gets smaller and smaller, and among the buildings, let's say, these blue containers of this station, this is the place, the smaller of the smaller of the smaller of the context. So going this far was for me like going to the furthest village in the furthest peripheral colonial empire that you can think of. Going this far to find the past, the condition of smallest isolation, confinement, restriction, and impossibility to leave. And smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay? This is the interior of the station. In this time of the year where I went, it was summer, therefore it was 24 hours daylight. Therefore, in order to have some possibility of sleeping, some areas of the stations were kept dark intentionally to produce a night effect type of. And this is the night effect. As you can see, it's a shining bright window at the end of the corridor, but it's okay. It was kind of dark. So, what was I doing there? And this is interesting for us, finally, because this is the way anthropology is linked and it's depending upon other disciplines and other expertise, other knowledge, okay, which at the same time depended on us. So the project that I joined is mainly a biological and computational project aimed at tracing the microbiome transmission among the people in the station. It's not so very important now. It's aimed at mapping the relationships among the people present there. So for biologists, the exchange of relations in the station meant to understand how often we touched each other, how often we were sharing the food, how often we were sharing the same glass, how long we were sleeping in the same rooms. Yes, because the rooms were for 4 people, so we were really sleeping in small spaces all together. We were working all together, sharing the tools, sharing the helicopters out, the pickups up. As you can understand as anthropologists, for me, this was extremely relevant to see what that meant in terms of relationships, because I might surely not exchange my glass with anyone, despite that's the person I shared the room with. There were only 2 rooms for women, 4 plus 4. Okay, job was very easy, but it didn't mean that I had to stay all the day with my fellow professors and researchers of my gender. So biogenomic data were collected in this simple way, which I'm kind of picturing here. Environmental data were collected by sampling environmental particular spots, which were selected by the project, but all of this happened onto a timeline of ethnographical observation. Okay, so that's the application of anthropology. It's providing the step onto which other knowledge can be built. So letting the other knowledge flow, because eventually the data set that we produce, which is being produced right now in these days, is disciplinary kind. So how comes that I exchange my glass with you? Is it because I work with you and we are confined in the same infrastructure there? Or is it because I share the room with you and therefore we happen to have at night, the same glass over there, right? And as a spy, as Robbie was saying before, yeah? As a spy, as somebody which is really nosy, right? I was around, I was lingering around, trying to catch all this and trying to put it in parallel ways with the other kind of exchanges in terms of biological and environmental interactions were produced. So, could anthropology survive by itself in such a context? Of course not. What's the point of having an anthropology? Didn't I think of writing a fully anthropological project for Antarctica? Yes, I did. Does it work? Not yet, let's say. They are not ready. No. Does this project need anthropology for understanding what the biological sample means? Yes, 100%. And that was the new thing, which was pushing us forward. Okay, now on. Let me see how many minutes have I been speaking. Oh, I didn't start the clock, so I don't know. Please, please give me a sign. So 30 minutes I have now. I just started. No. I'm just going to focus on a bit of environmental data. Okay. I'm sure you understand what it is. These are not my environmental data, of course. Okay, just I had prepared a different thing. Okay, so let's talk of energy supply, of power. The station is shut down for many months a year. It only works over summer. Therefore, all its equipment and technical gears get stuck and need to be restarted every year and again. And of course, wind propellers and solar panel are intensely installed. They count up to less than 15% of the energy supply. So, kerosene. Kerosene is arrived by ship, is cargoed and shipped to cargo once a year or twice a year. And it's stored in big tanks which stay around the station. Okay? This kerosene, as you might know, is one of the worst derivatives of oil, the most polluting and one of the less easy to burn, the one which produces most remains. And why that? Because it doesn't freeze, simply, as simple as that. It's the one that doesn't freeze. And it's used for fueling all type of plants which are in the station, so from the helicopters to the planes, to the cars, to the skidoos, to the power station, to the water desalination system. Okay, everything is fueled with the same oil derivative. So water management and waste management are complicated because the station is old. This station is 40 years old, which for Antarctica is a lot of years because everything is ruined very, very fastly over there. And it's very also complicated to have technical innovations. Paradoxically, this station resists innovation. Another very interesting outcome of my observation was that the life of the station is maintained through people which develop an expertise which is so linked to the existing that cannot be renovated. People can handle this station because they've been handling this particular station in the last so many years. So it's much better to maintain things as they are rather than doing them from scratch because it's too far, because it's too complicated. And then you can't run the risk, you cannot take the risk of having an innovation there which doesn't work. Only very stable, well-proven infrastructure can be brought to Antarctica to make sure that they will not deceive you, they will not betray the user. So paradoxically, it would be easier to start a station from scratch than to renovate one. And why do I list water management and waste management? Because these are two fields where innovations in the last 40 years has been huge. And anthropologists know that, not because they are technicians, but because they've been observing these plants, because we work in environmental anthropology every day. So observing what's going on in this particular station of Antarctica is so surprising, because it's as if you were doing a travel back in time. How comes that in a place where you expect maximal technology, you actually find plants which are 40 years old? It's astounding. But there, what's happened is the development of a very special expertise which is particularly dedicated to that. So it's like a bubble, as we were saying before with Massimo. Yeah, it's like producing a bubble where everything works the same way, anthropologically speaking, with a tradition. There's a technology of traditions, and there's a technology of memories, which is passed from one generation of technician to the other. So it's so interesting in terms of knowledge production processes, and also unlearning necessities which do not take place. So the station is defending itself from changing, and the people change, but the station doesn't. Okay? So I was part of this group with all the difficulties that you can imagine by being at the same time one of them and one of you, one in and one out, inside and outside, every type of challenges that each anthropology faces. But there we had another partner, which was the station as such. Okay, the station is a body. The station is a body that works all together with the people that let it work. And consider that most of the personnel there are dedicated to the working, to the functioning, not to the research. Research is a sort of little layer lying on top of this. So let me just quote a book here, which is written by a brilliant New Zealand colleague, Jessica O'Reilly. She's been joining the New Zealand Trust for Antarctic Heritage Research many years ago, and she wrote this volume on technocratic Antarctica, which is dedicated to the clashes between bureaucratic attempts of regulating the several levels affecting the weaknesses of the Antarctic Treaty and the material possibilities given in the stations as they are developed. Technocratic Antarctica has been issued in 2019, and with my great surprise was a book which was not known at all, neither in the anthropological community nor among those that actually do technocracy in Antarctica. So I had this book with me when I was in the station, and I was kind of spreading it around as a crazy, and not making myself many friends also because I had the book to go around with. It's not a very friendly place for books, this Antarctica station. But what this highlights, going back up, let me zoom out again to a bit of a larger scale, is how poorly the Antarctic Treaty can be implemented, environmentally speaking, if, let me explain to you a little bit this slide. The red dots are stations. This big gulf, V-shaped in the center of the map, is the Ross Sea, half of which is the ice shelf. So the lower part of the image is a sort of grayish because that's ice. And this is the ice which is melting fast, okay? So on north of the Ross ice shelf, so-called, we have these stations, and I named them starting from the top one, going down to the bottom. So the northern one, more at the north, and the map is the South Korean map. It's the Italian station built in 1984. The third, so the last one of the northern group, let's say, is the Chinese station. It's a brand new station, which is just opened less than 1 year ago. And then on the bottom of this gulf, on the very edge of the Ross Ice Shelf, we have the American station and the New Zealand station, which were opened in 1956 and 57. If you remember what I said before, this is even before the Antarctic Treaty was signed. So two stations, the one on the bottom of this ice shelf, are the oldest ones. Then there's the Italian one, coming from the 80s, and then very two modern ones. And if you take a look at the scale, the entire distance between the most two different points, distant points on the map, is actually less than 500 kilometers. So in 500 kilometer space, you have 5 stations belonging to not only 5 different nations, but 5 different geopolitical areas of the world that do not speak to each other, which implement their environmental regulation in whichever way. Okay? So as you move 100 kilometers north or south from any of these stations, you bump into a completely different setting. So what we're experiencing here is the superposition of mutually excluding environmental regulations. Environmental regulations are implemented at a local level, and it is, of course, such a huge weakness. So where does anthropology work here? How does it work? It works in collecting data of the kind I did across stations, which means across nations, and comparing and creating basis for an anthropological dialogue, if it's not a juridical dialogue, not yet, let's say. Within each station, we have a layered communities of people. I didn't stay much on this, but a number of different expertise and kinds of backgrounds insist on the same stations. Therefore, ethnography in a station needs to be multi-layered as well, meaning with multiple competencies. I was there as an anthropologist, but I am also a physicist, as was nicely introduced by Rachele. Definitely all my competencies served there, and each and other of the people there had more than one competence at stake. The ethnographer is this free mover that can go up and down, move across the layers of this complicated kind of community. Therefore, at the same time, the ethnographer enters into restricted spaces, like the cockpit of an helicopter, or larger external spaces where, in large spaces, very specific practices are put on stage. And this is the place where the anthropologists work their best, understanding the practices, the special, specific little practices, which only make sense in the larger, wider scale. So this connection between the local scale and the general scale is a connection that only anthropology does in this context, all right? Because all the other players, which are fundamental, either stay in one level or play in the other, and do not connect the two. So such a vector connecting is the ethnographic vector. Okay, so what you do in practical, what I try doing, is lending my time to others in order to have people lending their time to me, wanting to talk to me, wanting to stay with me, making sense of my time for them and the other way around, which worked in some cases and did not work in others. Let's not make it easy, because it didn't work at all, and it was considered annoying, and it was, I mean, my life wasn't easy all the time at all, but at the same time it became easier because somebody took my side, okay? So when you put your body at stake, then something happens. You cannot be friends with everybody, come on, not even in an easier field. There is not this station, okay? So, this sounds better in Italian. Nessuna disciplina si salva da sola. This is the title of a paper which I wrote when I was there. I started writing as I was there on the field, and basta for the